Mr. Secretary General, that was characteristically concise and strong and gave us a really good idea of what the next hours will be about for you. I think it's fitting that in a way the launch event is a successor generation event. But I was just talking to Marshall in the hallway, and it's almost wrong to call this future leaders because so many, though they are young, are already leaders. And they're leaders in business, they're leaders in academics, they're leaders in their various ministries, they're leaders in their military units. And so I don't want to ask the questions right now, although it's really hard for me to contain myself as a long-term Wall Street Journal editor. But so I'm going to go straight to the leaders, the young leaders, and let's get into a good conversation. But on behalf of everyone, I want to personally thank you because I know this is one of the things you're most passionate about, is the next generation. And at a hinge point of history, we see this meeting as particularly important because we're not just going to have them here, but we'll keep them together. And personally, they'll stay together. They'll be giving us suggestions about how to take this forward. They'll be together on Facebook, even if they haven't bought stock in the last couple of days. But let's go straight to the audience. Identify yourself and your question, please, and your country.
Ahmed Wahid from Afghanistan. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. And I have two questions. My first question is, could you please define who is the enemy of NATO in Afghanistan? Just in one word. And my second question is, how is that possible to address the problem in Afghanistan without focusing on the sanctuaries of those, you name it, Taliban, terrorists, Al-Qaeda, and we all know where they are, we all know where they reside, and why NATO hasn't been really serious about it? Thank you.
As you can see, the questions will be really easy ones. Please.
Yeah, on the first, the very short answer, of course, is that the Taliban is the enemy in Afghanistan. But actually, I think terrorists in general are enemies. But when speaking about Afghanistan, the Taliban is the enemy of Afghanistan. We will help the Afghan people to defend themselves against that enemy. And despite all the headlines you very often see in the media, the facts on the ground are that we are seeing progress when it comes to security. During the first quarter of this year, we have seen a decline in the number of enemy-initiated attacks by around 20% compared to the same period last year. So we are seeing progress. The Afghan security forces are making progress. Some weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit Kabul and see some of the special operation forces in action. I was very impressed. I am confident that they will be able to take full responsibility by the end of 2014. Actually, already now, they are in the lead of the security for areas covering around half of the population in Afghanistan. So we are on the right track. On sanctuaries, yes, of course, you're speaking about Pakistan. And we can't solve the problems in Afghanistan without a positive engagement of Pakistan. We have to solve these problems. We have invited President Zardari to attend the summit. I expect to have a meeting with him this afternoon. And of course, I will convey a couple of very clear messages.
Just on the Taliban, you say they're the enemy. Can one negotiate a solution with this enemy in this situation?
Well, actually, I don't know whether the Taliban leadership is prepared to negotiate a solution. Maybe not, I don't know, but I think we should give it a try, provided certain conditions are fulfilled. Firstly, a reconciliation process must be led by the Afghans themselves, so the Afghan government must be in the driver's seat. Secondly, groups and individuals involved in that reconciliation process must abide by the Afghan constitution and respect human rights, including women's rights. And thirdly, they must cut links to terrorist groups. If these conditions are fulfilled, why not give it a try? But Fred, my point is, the best way to facilitate a political process is to keep up the military pressure so that the Taliban realizes that they have no chance whatsoever to win militarily. So a continued and determined military campaign is the best way to facilitate a political solution.
Thank you, sir. Question here. First, the woman on our Turkish delegate.
Yes, I'm from Turkey, Merve Saran, working in the Turkish Parliament. I would like to hear your evaluation about the military's cultural competency of the NATO in the Afghanistan case. As we have seen after the Quran burning, the cultural competencies seems to be failed in many respects, at least they say like this. What do you think about how to advance the military's cultural competency?
It's an important point. I strongly regret the incidents we have seen, and General Allen, the commander of ISAF, has taken a number of important steps to prevent such incidents in the future. And a part of the measures to be taken is to raise what you call cultural awareness and religious awareness. That's of utmost importance. We can't afford to let such very regrettable incidents undermine trust and confidence between our troops and the Afghan people. And let me stress that the incidents we have seen do not in any respect represent the values we stand for. On the contrary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. One here, and then I'll go here. Sorry.
George Gamkralitsa, delegate from Georgia. First of all, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation and for sharing your values about your family. But we are very interested in membership and also the partnership. From the Georgian perspective, we analyze that this summit is not dedicated on the enlargement process, but during your last visit in Tbilisi, you affirmed that Georgia will become member of NATO. I have a question. What is the most challenging issue for Georgia on the way to NATO integration? Is it territorial integrity or demand for transformation and democratic reforms?
And while you're taking that on, perhaps you can talk about the absence of enlargement at this summit in general and whether this is a pause and then when we'll go forward, or how you're viewing that as well. So Georgia and enlargement.
Well, I wouldn't call it a pause, Fred. It's a continued process. Our door remains open. And that's a very important signal to send from this summit. Our door remains open. I will remind you that our open door policy is founded in the NATO Treaty Article 10. According to Article 10, the alliance may invite any European country that can contribute to Euro-Atlantic security and is in a position to further the principles upon which our alliance is based. We may invite any such country to join our alliance. So it's a treaty-founded principle, the open door policy, and we will reaffirm our open door policy at this summit. But having said that, of course, we also have to make sure that countries that join our alliance can actually fulfill the criteria for becoming fully fledged members. And we are assisting the aspirant countries in that respect. We help them to carry through the necessary reforms. And that brings me to the Georgia question. No doubt that this summit will send encouraging messages to Georgia, because Georgia has made remarkable progress when it comes to reforms. Let me remind you that already in 2008, the NATO summit in Bucharest clearly stated that Georgia will become a member of NATO. That's a clear statement. And we will reaffirm that at this summit, as we have done at previous summits. But we would also like to make it very visible that we appreciate the progress Georgia has made. And actually, Georgia will be present at 3 very important events at this summit. Georgia will, of course, participate in the ISAF meeting because Georgia is one of our major contributors to our operation in Afghanistan, for which we are very, very grateful. Secondly, Georgia will participate in a partnership event, a special partnership event. We gather 13 partners that contribute in a particular valuable way, economically, militarily, or politically to our operations. And Georgia is among these partners. And thirdly, we have also organized a special event for 4 aspirant countries, among them Georgia, and by the way also Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Macedonia, or formerly, I have to say, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. These 4 countries will meet at the level of foreign ministers. So Georgia will be present and in a very visibly way be among our core partners.
Thank you. Please.
Sorry, I forgot one thing. What is a core issue? You hinted at it yourself. I think the elections this fall will be very important, and how they are conducted will be observed with great interest.
Thank you for that important statement. Please.
Hi, my name is Kristen Durant. I'm Danish American, and I'm president of the Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. We've done a little international competition where young people could submit questions to you. So I have a question to you from Montenegro, and the question goes, it's very much in relation to what you've just spoken about, but from Maria Martinovic from Montenegro. She wants to know, what can the Western Balkans offer NATO, and are all Western Balkan countries ready to join NATO?
I think the countries in the Western Balkans can offer stability in Europe. We all know the history of Europe. We all know that many conflicts in Europe have been rooted in the Balkans. I'm pleased to see that NATO and KFOR has been a guarantor of peace and stability in the Western Balkans since the late 90s. But now I think countries in the region can contribute in a very valuable way to ensuring peace and stability in that part of Europe. And when you have a look at the map, you might call the Western Balkans, I would call it unfinished business. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has created the framework together with the European Union for reunification of Europe. We have ensured a Europe whole, free, and at peace. But I see the Western Balkans as an unfinished business. To complete this European integration process, and I would call it this European peace project, we need to include all, I stress, all the countries in the Western Balkans in the Euro-Atlantic structures, that is NATO and the European Union. And that would be a very valuable contribution from the countries in the Western Balkans. I'm very pleased to see how much progress Montenegro has made in that respect. It's really significant what we have seen of progress in Montenegro. Definitely there's still work to do, but we have seen significant progress. As you may know, as far as Bosnia-Herzegovina is concerned, we have granted Bosnia-Herzegovina what I would call a condition-based membership action plan. This membership action plan will be activated as soon as the country has implemented reforms of some defense properties. And as far as Skopje is concerned, we have made clear that we are ready to start accession negotiations as soon as a mutually satisfactory solution to the name issue has been found. And I hope to see progress in our relationship with Serbia. So all in all, I appreciate what we have seen. More has to be done, but the Western Balkans are on the right track.
Thank you, sir. There's so many questions that I'll do my best. The gentleman with the glasses, and it's very hard for me to know who was first, so I'll do my best. Please.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for hosting us. My name is Tamim Asi. I represent a delegate from Afghanistan. Briefly, I'm going to ask 3 questions, but before that, I would like to convey the gratitude of the Afghan people for the blood and the treasure, the sacrifices that NATO members have done. And we're extremely grateful for that. And as a result of that, millions of people are living and going to school, and like me, coming here and attending different summits. The first question is what will be the nature and scope of the post-ISAF engagement and post-NATO engagement beyond 2014? Because when this war started, it was a global war on terror, and wherever there were sanctuaries, wherever there was financing, and wherever there was anybody hosting terrorism, proper measures should have been taken. But unfortunately, in case of Afghanistan, what has happened is that we know the sanctuaries are based in Pakistan, the leadership of Taliban are there in Pakistan, but not much has been done for quite some obvious reasons, and some of them unknown. We also know that Taliban are getting medical treatment in Iran, and there are hospitals there. They're also provided logistics support through various reports that we read. Will the post-ISAF engagement, post-NATO engagement beyond 2014 include and address such questions? The second question is about the question of how are we going to deal with the whole negotiation process with the Taliban. The Americans have one narrative, NATO has another narrative. The Americans are calling it as Al-Qaeda and their affiliates. They have a war there, and rather NATO is now calling the Taliban the enemy. And there's also a negotiation going on, which frankly has not yielded into any result. And this negotiation has kind of legitimized Taliban as an alternative political force in Afghanistan. So people are now looking at them as a more of alternative government in some cases. How would you address that question? And lastly, we know that in Pakistan, Al-Qaeda has been defeated, and their sanctuaries and their networks to some extent has been damaged. But now they have shifted to Yemen, to Syria, and to Somalia. Will NATO address the question of their movement or shifting their command structures to these other countries? Thank you very much.
And given the importance of Afghanistan, we'll give special dispensation that you've got 3 questions, but for future delegates, it will be 1 each. And I think the new aspect of the Taliban question is, are you not concerned that through negotiating you're legitimizing a force that may not necessarily be a positive force? So these 3 questions.
Yeah, but let me take that first.
Yeah.
NATO, let me stress, NATO is not negotiating with the Taliban. As I stressed, such a process must be led by the Afghan government. The legitimate Afghan government must be in the lead of that process. So NATO is not negotiating with the Taliban, let me stress that. I don't think the Afghan people as such and in general consider the Taliban a legitimate alternative to the current government. According to opinion polls, it's only a small minority, a very small minority of the Afghans that really would like to see the Taliban back. And now, when we see the progress we have achieved in Afghanistan, who would like to return to the dark ages of the Taliban regime? Last year, we saw growth of economic growth 7% in Afghanistan. We have seen how a number of markets, lively markets, have been opened. I think I saw a figure that 80% of Afghans now possess a mobile phone. I mention this because that's very important in today's world to promote economic growth and economic interaction. We see a very lively media environment in Afghanistan. How could you imagine the Taliban return when people have tasted that kind of freedom and modern society? Not to speak about the progress we have made within education. 8 million children go to school, out of which more than 3 million are girls who were not allowed to get an education in the past. We have seen progress within health. Life expectancy has increased. Child mortality has decreased. We see progress all over. I'm not going to paint a too optimistic picture. Not in any way. Don't make any mistake. There are still a lot of challenges in Afghanistan. But we should remind ourselves that we have seen significant progress. And I don't think people want the Taliban back and destroy all that. Now, on the post-2014 mission, we will stay committed, as I mentioned in my introduction. The core will be a training mission. So, ISAF will end by the end of 2014. A NATO-led training mission will take over. So, the combat will be done by the Afghan security forces after 2014, but we will be there to support the Afghan security forces. You asked me whether we're going to address the challenges of the sanctuaries and the true free flow of terrorists across the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. As I mentioned, we have engaged and we will continue to engage the Pakistani. And as regards the international presence in Afghanistan beyond the NATO-led training mission, I would refer to the strategic partnership agreement that was recently approved between the United States and Afghanistan, which also includes some security provisions. Finally, on Al-Qaeda, I can't imagine NATO traveling from country to country to fight Al-Qaeda, but I can assure you that we will do whatever it takes to protect our populations against terrorist attacks. Also, if it's necessary, to address that issue directly at the root.
Thank you. Toward the back and the left there. Yes, please. With the
My name is Adam Sanders. Hello. My name is Adam Sanders, and I'm from Latvia. I'm one of the IRA winners. You were briefly talking about the smart defense, and can you elaborate a bit on that? Because I know that countries like UK are going to be slashing their defense budgets until 2012 quite rapidly, and many countries are getting rid of their fleets, etc. So could you elaborate what's the progress in that area? Because I'm doing international relations and read a lot about NATO and its importance being diminished in international politics. Thank you.
And let's take one more next year.
Thank you. My name is Lawrence Cochran. I'm from the United States. I'm here with Dr. Nwanze's program. To build on the smart defense question, the smart defense question, I would like to ask the Secretary General how important does he think that anti-ballistic missile defense is in the current, with the current economic situation and smart defense. Thank you.
That it may be endangered, the program. Yeah.
On smart defense in general, let me right from the outset stress that smart defense is not meant to be a smart way to cut defense budgets, but it's a smarter way of spending the money we do have. And now let's be realistic. During this period of economic austerity, we will be faced with declining defense budgets. Some of you might wish to see it differently, but let's face it, the political reality is that governments are forced to make deep cuts to get their finances in order, to reduce deficits, to reduce debts. And actually, there is also a link between economics and security. If countries have too big deficits, if they are too indebted, they will also be too dependent and too fragile. To put it bluntly, you can't be safe if you are broke. So sound fiscal policies are also sound security policies. And of course, the defense and security sector must make a contribution also to bring the finances in order. So that's my clear point of departure. Also speaking as a former prime minister, I know what's the reality. If you force the Minister of Social Affairs and Education to cut budgets, you can't argue, it would be political suicide, that the defense minister should be exempted from that exercise. So let's face it, that's the reality. In that environment, we will now introduce this new approach that instead of going for purely national solutions, then let's promote multinational cooperation. Because except for the United States, most of other allies will have increasing difficulties in the future to acquire expensive military equipment on their own. But if they join forces, if they join efforts, if they pool and share resources, they can. We have an excellent example. 10 allies and partners have acquired 3 expensive transport aircrafts in a joint project. Individually they couldn't, but by pooling and sharing the resources, they have now acquired 3 expensive aircraft. So we have now that capability at our disposal. Otherwise we wouldn't. That's smart defense, and we will now expand that approach to other areas. And I think missile defense is an excellent example of such a multinational cooperation. I know that in the United States there is a debate that missile defense is primarily a US project. And yes, the US contribution is significant, but I think 10 European allies will also contribute to that overall system. We have just decided in a joint effort among 13, now it will be 14 because Denmark has joined again, a joint ADS project, Allied Ground Surveillance it's called, is to acquire 5 drones. And we learned from the Libya operation we need that capacity. And now 14 countries will acquire it in a joint effort. We also learned that we need air-to-air refueling. And European allies will now, through the European Defence Agency, acquire such capabilities. Just to mention that smart defense, it is about concrete projects. It's about a new way of thinking, a more cooperative approach. So I think the economic crisis will really facilitate that new way of addressing the acquisition of military equipment. And on a final note, yes, missile defense is indispensable. We are faced with a real missile threat. 30 countries in the world have missile technologies or are aspiring to get it, some of them with a range to hit NATO territory. And of course, against a real threat, we need a real defense.
It's hugely expensive, though.
Well, the NATO part of this is not that expensive. We have already some years ago committed ourselves to developing what we call theater missile defense. That is a missile defense to protect our deployed forces. The cost of that would be around 800 billion euros. And on top of that, we can now protect not just our deployed forces, but the whole population by connecting these theater missile defense systems with the US system. And through this interlink, we can expand protection of deployed forces to be a protection of the whole population. And the additional cost is just 200 billion euros. So all in all, it's a very good economic deal. Of course, there are national investments in that, but I think the protection of our populations is priceless.
Thank you. Let me go here. I think let's take 2 questions right there, and these are going to have to be the final 2 questions. Sorry.
Hello, Secretary. Hello, Secretary General. My name is Joshua Faust. I'm from the United States with a think tank called the American Security Project. I have another question about smart defense, actually relating to mediation. So the last 3 military engagements that NATO countries have been involved in haven't had total consensus between member countries in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in Libya. There have been very hard questions asked about which countries are contributing in which ways. So my question about the smart defense idea is that if these countries are reliant on each other to provide all of the necessary personnel and equipment to engage in these missions, what's the arbitration mechanism when they don't agree on a single policy? So if 2 countries have shared custody of, say, a transport airplane, but only one of them wants to engage in a conflict, how do you actually mediate usage between those 2 countries? Thank you.
Interesting question. And then one here in back, and I'm very sorry that I've been unable to get to everybody.
Hi, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Mark Sorrell. I'm a U.S. citizen and residing here in Chicago. Thank you for your remarks today. When you talk about smart defense, it sounds like a great plan around capabilities. My question, building somewhat off of what Josh just had to say, is around intent. And my question is, going forward, there's been a lot of talk about how Afghanistan and Libya are the kinds of engagements you won't see NATO engage in the future. And so there's always been a kind of organizing principle for NATO and what its intent is with respect to threats in the world. I'm wondering what you see as being some of those potential future threats that could be organizing principles for NATO's intent going forward. Thank you.
So that's future threats, intermediation. And let me close with one where I hope you can also put on one of the great strengths you've brought to being Secretary General is you've also been the Prime Minister of a Eurozone country. You said earlier you can't be safe if you're broke. What impact does this Eurozone crisis have on security issues? And what additional concerns does it cause for you at NATO? And let's do that, wrap it up. I know you're down to your last 3 or 4 minutes, and so if you need to keep these answers short, I think we would all understand that.
Yeah, first I think I have to correct myself using 2 big figures on the missile defense system, because I think I spoke about billions. Actually, it's less expensive. I meant millions. So, and of course it makes a huge difference. But the figures as such are correct. The theater missile defense system that NATO allies have committed themselves to already some years ago, the NATO part of that cost will be 800 million euros. And on top of that, by linking the systems, equivalent to a cost of 200 million euros, we will expand the coverage to be a coverage of the whole population instead of just deployed troops. So it is really, from an economic point of view, a very good deal. So I hope there will be no misunderstanding on that. Now, if I understand the question correctly, it's about what we call assured access. How to ensure that if countries join a multinational project, then these assets, these capabilities will actually also be deployed, if they so wish. Now, if 10 countries have joined efforts and they have acquired a multinational capability, and one of them say, no, we will not accept that this capability is deployed for this or that mission, what then? And it is really a key question. We are working on that because we have identified it as one of the key questions to be answered if we are to really reach a breakthrough in the use of multinational capabilities. At the end of the day, it is, of course, a political question because we have to respect that it is national sovereignty to decide whether capabilities can be deployed. But already today we have multinational capabilities, and very often they are based on a memorandum of understanding, and I think some political commitments could be put in such papers. At least it will be a strong presumption that such a multinational capability would be available, could be deployed if needed. But we have to work on that. So you have really touched upon a key issue. Now, on future threats, well, I have already touched upon missile threats. I think that's a real threat of the future. That's why we are building a missile defense system. I think international terrorism will continue to constitute a threat. I think in general the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction will be a threat. So my point is that we have, as a military alliance, as a security organization, we have to be ready for the unexpected. That's actually the main thing, that we are ready even for the unexpected. Finally, the Eurozone crisis and its implications for security. I have already touched upon it. There is a direct link between security and economy. If your economy is weak, you have less resources for security. But the security challenges are still there. So it is really a key question, how you can provide security in a time of economic austerity. And that will be the theme of the first discussion among heads of state and government tomorrow afternoon. And I will put some tough questions on the table, because we have to realize the economic and political reality. We will not get more money for defense in the very near future. So we have to pursue a new approach to get more out of what we have, to make more efficient use of our resources. I hope that when the economy recovers, there will be more resources available for the necessary investments in our common security. But I consider this summit a very positive and convincing answer to the huge economic challenge we are faced with, because I would expect heads of state and government to adopt a comprehensive defense package tomorrow afternoon, a defense package that will include a number of very concrete very concrete defense capabilities, a commitment to acquire these. I have already mentioned missile defense. I mentioned the Allied ground surveillance, the drone project, air-to-air refueling, air policing of the Baltic states, more than 20 different multinational projects within which we have identified lead nations and participants. So I think this is the answer during this period of economic crisis, that despite the economic challenges, we commit ourselves to acquire the necessary military capabilities. We adopt a new approach, a more cooperative approach. I think that's the way forward.
Mr. Secretary General, we've had questions from Afghanistan, from Turkey, from Georgia, from a Danish American representing Montenegro, from a Latvian, from Americans. So you see the richness of this group. And I think on behalf of all of them, I want to thank you for honoring them with giving so much time, answering so frankly in this discussion. We also want to thank you for your leadership, your really remarkable leadership, and wish you the best in the coming hours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.